Hi, good afternoon, everybody. You are joining the Lextran Board of Directors May 2020 meeting. And I would just, if I could take 1 minute, I am here in my office by myself, socially distancing, but I did want to just take a minute to use this opportunity as a reminder. We are asking passengers to please wear a mask when you're riding or out in public. And our drivers and employees are also wearing masks. So just wanted to take a minute as a reminder to everybody. This is a way to protect each other from the COVID 19 pandemic virus. I am going to take the mask off. I'm in my office by myself right now. So thank you for that little public service announcement. Um, we are holding this meeting virtually, and due to the COVID 19 pandemic, state of emergency, and Governor Bashir's executive orders regarding social distancing, this meeting of the Lextran Board of Directors is being held via video teleconference pursuant to Senate 150, as signed by the governor on March 30th, 2020, and Attorney General Opinion 20-05, and in accordance with KRS 61.826, because it is not feasible to offer a primary physical location for the meeting. So, just some information on that. And at this point, I will turn it over to the board chair of the Lexington Board of Directors, Mr. Motley. Thank you.
Thanks, Carrie. We'll call the meeting to order and we'll start by asking if there's any public comment on agenda items. If not, we will look to approve the meeting minutes from the last meeting, but we're going to take a pause and till we get a quorum. So we'll move to the next item. I'll share just a brief chair's report. Just number one, I want to make sure to continue to share my appreciation for Lextran, the Lextran staff, and my fellow board members. Still working through a very challenging time, still working to respond to changes that are happening almost daily from the local, state, and federal level. Two things I do want to make sure to point out. Um, the team is working to respond. I'm thinking about the um, Healthy at Work initiative launched from our governor. And so uh, I'm thinking about Carrie. She started the meeting with her mask on. We want to make sure that as the economy begins to reopen, more folks are sort of out in public, managing themselves, social distancing, but finding more opportunities to shop and things like that. Um, when folks jump on the Lextran buses, part of the guidance is the hope that riders, in addition to drivers, will be wearing masks. We want to continue to try to protect the public health. The last thing I want to mention is that we are exploring options to try and make sure that the Lextran team members feel valued and appreciated through, again, this very difficult time, this pandemic. Nothing to report out yet. We are having conversations. As soon as they are kind of firm footing to share next steps, we'll make sure to share that with the board. But I do want to just flag that those are conversations that are happening.
Hey, thank you very much. I just noticed that I believe we had another board member join. So if perhaps you could do a roll call for board members, and then I think we'll be able to move to the minutes if I've done my math correctly with the number of folks on the call.
Sure. Adrian, if it's okay, I'll do first names if that's okay. You just give me a shout or a hand. Marcy,
Marcy's here.
Peggy, Eli,
I'm here.
Rick,
Rick's here.
George. I don't think George can make it today. And Joe. Did I miss anyone? Okay,
I don't think so, and I believe that's 5.
perfect. Well, let's go back then and see if we can get approval of the minutes. Take a second if you need to scan um, the minutes. And if there would be a motion to approve,
I move to approve the minutes.
is there a second?
I'll second. It's Marcy.
All in favor, say aye or show us your thumb.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Apologies for the pause. I'm navigating my agenda on my screen. The next piece, are we ready to go to the performance report?
Yes, and I'll ask Ms. Jill Barnett to please start with the performance report. Thanks.
Okay, my apologies. I had to unmute myself. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, wonderful. Okay, well, this is the performance report for the month of April. As Mr. Motley shared, another somewhat challenging month, given that we are still in a pandemic and are working through that with guidance that changes sometimes daily. Ms. Falconberry, if you could give me control of the screen. Thank you. Right. As a reminder, we serve people and our community with mobility solutions. That is our mission statement. That mission statement is ringing very true each and every day throughout this pandemic. Wanted to take a quick look at some ridership numbers. I do wish that they were better to share with you here, but I did want to highlight, the gray bar highlights the monthly average over the last, I believe it's the last 5 years. And so you will see prior to the pandemic starting, we were actually tracking above that monthly average. Our ridership had shown growth. Suddenly, COVID-19 happened and our ridership dropped. In the month of March, it was down about 30%. And following into the month of April, it is now down close to 70%. So this chart just shows the same information, but as a percentage change relative to the monthly average, with the solid line of right there being the baseline.
And Jill, just for context, this is in response to COVID. We had, so we can see the reduction in ridership, but we also reduced actual routes, right? Did we consolidate some routes?
We did consolidate a few routes. We reduced our service by about 33%. Routes where we see normally really high ridership and routes that serve hospitals, we didn't eliminate any service in those areas because we knew that where we would need to continue to allow for social distancing. However, I would say that the drop in our ridership is considerably greater than the drop in service. It's not one we would expect with that type of reduction. One other major part of our ridership that is missing currently is related to campus service at the university. Normally, we are transporting a lot of students. The University of Kentucky is not in class now. Even in their summer sessions, they're not holding on-campus classes, so that service is not available. So that's another big reduction for us.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Just another look at April and our ridership numbers. Last month, this number for total ridership was closer to, I think, 450,000. It's down significantly this month. That is to be expected. I will be interested, as I'm sure you will be as well, to see what next month looks like. As you know, things are starting to reopen. Our economy is reopening with healthy at work. Businesses are doing what they can to comply with that and get their doors back open. Retail stores open today. So hopefully, people who may have been physically unable to go to their job will be able to return, and we'll start to see some of that pick back up. Later this week, I believe restaurants open as well. And so we'll be interested to see how this number grows. I don't expect a rapid increase in our ridership, but do anticipate a slow uptick. In the reductions in ridership that we've seen on the fixed route system, we've also seen corresponding reductions on our paratransit service as well. On the safety side, we had an improvement in safety over last month. We had less than one accident per 100,000 miles of service, down to 2 workers' compensation claims, and went 27 days, 27 work days with no preventable accidents. So very, very pleased there. Our maintenance department, proud of our maintenance department as well. They completed 100% of their preventive maintenance inspections, which was a total of 40. And that is, they stayed on track, even being down a few staff members. So pleased to see that. I wanted to highlight some of the ways that the community has supported us. We have continued service throughout the COVID-19 pandemic. We have never closed our doors. And we've been pleased to get some community support and have really appreciated that. I wish I had some better photos of this to share. And on April 29th, Emmanuel Baptist Church provided lunch for a number of our employees. They brought Chick-fil-A, and the image that's shown here on the right is a screenshot that I captured from some of their social media, and it was of when they were dropping things off. And down in the bottom there, you see one of our supervisors as well as 2 of our operators, and that's at our downtown transit center. And the person on top is Dale Stone. He's our manager of schedules and services. Emmanuel dropped off at our downtown transit center, as well as at our Loudon office to support some of the operators who might have been on site, as well as some of our maintenance employees and other staff members. So very, very grateful that they thought of Lextran and reached out to do that. On this next slide, I wanted to show you a really nice thank you card that we received from a longtime rider. She says, to the staff at Lextran, you are highly appreciated for your outstanding customer service and creative transportation. Blessings to all you do for your passengers. We actually received another card from this same passenger, I want to say the following week. But it's nice to be able to share that with our employees, to let them know that the community recognizes the work that they are doing as well. And before we move into financials, my apologies. Before we move into our financials, I wanted to share a video with you that some of you may have participated in. A number of our staff participated in this video as well, in addition to members of the community and some of our riders. We did this video as a thank you, and it was shared on some media outlets, but wanted to share that with you. And Alan is going to cue that up.
There are a lot of heroes out there.
People who keep our society moving.
People who selflessly put themselves on the front line to serve us.
So thank you.
To our healthcare workers.
Our mail carriers.
Our truck drivers.
Our grocery store workers.
And everyone who is fighting the good fight.
But we would especially like to thank our operations and maintenance staff.
Without you, many needs would go unmet.
During this time, people still need Lextran for essential services.
To get to work.
To get to the grocery.
To medical appointments.
And to care for those in need.
So thank you.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lextran operators and maintenance staff.
You are our heroes.
I see your snaps, Christian. Thank you for those. Thank you for your starring role in that as well. I'm very grateful to the members of the community, members of the board, and fellow staff members who participated in that. We're pleased to be able to highlight some of our operators and maintenance folks in there as well, and hope that just helps continue to get the word out that, you know, our operators are an essential part of the community. Our maintenance staff is an essential part of the community, and we're keeping things moving, just like lots of other essential workers out there. But our employees often aren't mentioned when there's talk about essential workers, but they've been out there every single day and very appreciative for what they do. I'm happy to take any questions about anything in the performance report, but if there aren't any, I would be happy to turn it over to Nikki, Ms. Falkenberry, who can get into our April financials.
I think we're good. Thanks, Jill.
Thank you.
Let me share the screen again. Okay, looking at our financials, we're about in the same place that we were financially this time last year. Our cash is running about the same, and our inventory as well as some of our other expenses are running about the same. We have expenses related on the other page. I'll go over those in a moment. If you don't have any questions about the balance sheet, anyone have any questions?
When does our $13,000 grant? Is that deposited? Is that in May?
It's done on a reimbursement basis.
Oh, okay.
So when we will submit expenses for our personal protection equipment and some of our hours and our fuel and things like that for reimbursement.
Won't you have to put payroll in there at some point?
Yes, there'll be wages and benefits for our operations staff, and also some maintenance costs for our preventive maintenance.
And we have what till the end of December? How long does it take for us to earn that grant?
It doesn't expire. We have spread it out over 18 months for operating expenses, but it can be longer. That was the majority of people are doing 12 to 18 months transit agency, so that's what we're doing.
So something like 800,000 a month, right? Something like that.
Yes.
And that'll be counted as income, right?
Yes, it'll be counted as grant income. Yes.
Okay.
As you'll notice from the statement of revenue and expenses, our property taxes are coming in right at about little over where we budgeted. Passenger revenue obviously is down because we did not collect any revenue for the month of April. Our other expenses have remained pretty much the same. We have wages and fringe. We have some of our professional services. We'll see a savings in that for this year because of some things we were not able to complete before the end of the fiscal year. Our diesel fuel is running very low at this time. We're still continuing to watch that every day. It is the lowest that I ever remember seeing. It was right at $1 a gallon last week. So our other expenses, utilities, insurance, things like that remain about the same. Our paratransit expenses are less than budget. We're 136,000 under budget. We are still paying them for some trips that they're doing, plus some of the shadow service that they're helping us with. And we've had a savings in travel and training because obviously nobody can go anywhere, so we have saved some money there. So everything else is about the same. We are under budget, about 922,000. And we'll probably continue to be around that amount for the end of June. Anything we don't use will roll over into the next year. So, does anyone have any questions regarding the financials? Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Nikki. we're going to go into the technology presentation.
Yes, thank you. This is a presentation that is being given by members of the technology consulting firm IBI Group, and we'll talk a little bit more after their presentation about the resolution that's before you. But it is refers to a contract that was passed in August of last year, and different phases of this technology study and the results of this first phase strategic plan. So at this point, I will turn it over to Fred Combs, and he will do some introduction of the IBI group who are joining us via teleconference, and will run through the presentation. So Mr. Combs, if you'll take it away, please.
Thank you very much. And as Carrie said, this project was slated to go over 3 separate phases. This first phase was very, very interesting, and we learned a lot, not only about the way that we're looking at things and the way that we can do things better in the future. So I have today from the IBI group, Mr. Nahit Jain. He's going to do the presentation as the project manager on their side, supported by Mackenzie DeCarl and Max DeValiers. So gentlemen, if you would, take it away.
Thanks, Fred. Thanks, Carrie. Can everyone hear me reasonably well? And can you see my screen as well? So you should have a presentation. Okay, it's great. So let me actually switch to full screen, and hopefully you can still see my screen. So yeah, really good afternoon to everyone. Really appreciate the opportunity to present some of the work we've been doing with Fred, Alan, Carrie, Jill, all the team out at Lextran over the last 6 to 8 months or so. I think Carrie already mentioned it. We sort of were brought in to really take a look at the technologies. And obviously, I know the current circumstances, they're sort of illustrating what role technology plays in really having the agency be flexible. Its technology is just a very small component of the agency, but it helps the agency kind of transition between different ways of operating relatively quickly. That aside, I think a lot of our focus is really through this project to try and figure out where Lextran currently is in terms of technology, and then more importantly, where they would like to be in 5 to 10 years down the line, and really try and figure out how to get there. And so I know I have a pretty long presentation. It's actually 23 slides, and I know we have only about 15 to 20 minutes. So I might skip through quite a few slides quickly, but please, this is interactive. So if you have any questions, feel free to stop me at any point, and we can stay on that slide and get your responses to questions, or kind of come back to it towards the end, however you feel comfortable. And so why don't I get started? Just a quick introduction about IBI Group. As Fred already introduced me, I'm Nihit Jain. With Mackenzie and Max, my colleagues. Santosh, another colleague, couldn't join us. We're an architecture consulting engineering group with about 2,500 people across the world. Our focus really is transportation, technology, and data systems. That's a big focus for our company. And so we're really excited to work with Lextran. I think on the agenda for the presentation, really we're going to focus a lot on the phase 1 of the project. So that's the strategic planning part. We'll kind of touch upon the next phases that we've come upon, the recommendations for what to do next. But really the bulk of the presentation will be talking about phase 1. And so that's the strategic planning process. So I think you're all quite familiar with strategic planning, but overall for technology, one of the methods that we typically like to follow is FTA recommended systems engineering based process. So that process really starts with gathering input from all the stakeholders, from kind of gathering documentation information, again, about the existing systems. Really the aim there is the more you know about the systems that are in place, the more you know about what the different stakeholders would like, the better you can inform what things should be in the future. So we started with that needs and issues, kind of did on the side some technology alternatives review. Really, we had through the process a pretty good sense of where things are. But then the next step was to try and think about what is the longer term vision. And so we had a on-site workshop where we did some visioning, goal setting. And we came up with a system architecture vision. And then from that point on, it was more of a question of let's think about here is where we want to be in terms of technologies, in terms of the technological system architecture in the future. How do we get there? What are your current priorities? What are the things that really don't work for your customers, that really don't work for, again, the agency people who are using those systems, and then use that to build it into a series of recommendations of here is where you need to go next. I just want to pause here. Any questions about the process? Because then we're going to start diving into some of the outcomes. Um, and again, we can come back to this. We actually have submitted a few reports. So this is a very quick overview of that process. So I'll move on again. So in terms of the needs assessment findings, just the very initial couple of months of the project, we actually had a pretty detailed process, and we actually came up with like 50 high to mid-level needs. Won't bore you with kind of the nitty-gritty details. There are sort of four categories or themes which emerged. And so those are up there. Data and performance management, that was a big theme. It was really about, there are a lot of technology systems that are already being used by Lextran. Uh, Most of those systems, and there are some systems which are better, but most of those systems, it's hard to kind of get data in once data is in there. It's hard because there are lots of manual processes. Once data is in there, various different departments or users use the data. And as it flows through the technological chain, there's challenges, either transferring the data, making sure it's accurate. Part of that is the technology systems that are in place don't always meet the needs of the users or the stakeholders within the different departments. That was a big theme. The other big theme was vendor management. Um, and again, sorry if I don't hear a question. I thought I heard someone speak. Anyway, I'll continue going. The other theme, big theme, was vendor management. So again, the theme there was, again, it varies, but there are very few vendors who kind of are easy to deal with. The other vendors have been challenging. Some of that stems from the fact that a lot of the technology systems that are in place are essentially one person systems in some case, or there are other systems where like Strand was one of their starting agencies, and now they have much bigger clients. So it's kind of a unique spectrum right there. Um, so that was another theme. The business process organizational theme, I'd say it stemmed a lot from the technology systems have largely been there for the last 10 years. There's not been a ton of change over the last 10 years. And so a lot of the technologies that are in use are a little bit outdated. And I know things have changed a lot really in the last 5, 10 years. Uh, while technologies did a lot of the same functions previously, the user interfaces and then the ease of use was much harder in the early 2000s, and then uh, up to 2010, 2000, even 15 is when where the user interface started getting a lot more attention. So over time, people have had to develop workarounds. Part of this is, again, fairly common with transit agencies. There's also turnover of staff, and then if training is not conducted regularly, then some of that knowledge is lost, especially for systems that are sort of more custom or smaller limited agency systems. They don't always have good documentation to go with them. And then the last theme was really the technical theme. And on the technical side, again, kind of linked to the other themes, um, lots of manual workarounds. I think that's the big theme there. Doesn't always support the needs of the users. Um, so I know, again, this is a lot of information on one slide. If there's questions, I'm happy to come back to it, but if not.
I have a quick
Okay.
question. This is Christian.
Absolutely. Yes.
Under vendor management, you all listed contractual incentives. What do you mean by that?
So I think in the transit industry is interesting in terms of the technology space. Certainly, there aren't a lot of necessarily a lot of vendors out there who really focused on transit. So historically, it's been a little bit hard to really get a contract in place that has sort of performance incentives built in. You kind of know that there are one or two vendors out there, but slowly, as there are more, again, vendors in the marketplace, there's been a bit of an acceptance that you can build some more performance incentives, uh, or usually you want to do more of a carrot approach than a stick approach. But so you can actually have, again, SLAs, so service level agreements. If you do not respond to any of our queries in a certain amount of time, you are going to get deductions. So that's a stick approach. Or as long as you are maintaining high uptime for this system, you are actually going to get a little bit more money that was originally, again, intended. There's a lot of uncertainty that you can kind of mitigate through building in those incentives. There's obviously some financial uncertainty that comes about from it, but you really want to make sure that you have more tighter control over your vendors, essentially. Uh, you don't want to just say, hey, here's a contract for 5 years, uh, perform, or else 5 years down the line, we're going to switch to another vendor. Because then you're sort of, even though you have some flexibility, you're kind of stuck with that vendor for 5 years. So you want to have some flexibility built in through that process. Sorry, I know there was a long winding answer to that question, but okay. Sorry, I go ahead, please.
Uh, is the overall objective, I assume, to make us more efficient?
Yeah, so I think there's efficiency is certainly a big part of this. It's really about being efficient from the perspective of the users within the agency. But then the other aspect to this is really making the system and the technologies be such that the users of the system actually get the information they need. Uh, and so I'd say efficiency is one theme. Another is really user experience, whoever that user is.
So if we're more efficient, does that involve the elimination of positions?
So I'd say that right now, and again, others can feel free to jump in. My sense is transit agencies are already generally understaffed. I think you want to be making best use of the staff you already have, and so that they can really focus on what has the best impact. Kind of really the challenges are sometimes customers may not be getting the real-time information they need, or people may have to do like on the maintenance management system, they may have to enter data into 3 different locations, and that prevents them from doing better maintenance related reporting. While if the system was a little bit better, they enter information once, it kind of filters through and informs the reporting site. So maybe they can actually focus more on making sure the maintenance of equipment works most efficiently. So it's not necessarily about reducing people, it's about how to make sure that things are more efficient, if that makes sense.
No, it doesn't.
Okay.
If you're going to increase efficiency, I would think that would mean being more productive. That would mean doing what needs to be done with less people.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think part of this is we don't want to be the ones making that decision for you. I think we can give recommendations. I think there are efficiencies certainly that exist. How to utilize the resources that you have. There will be efficiencies. People will have more time to focus on things that are a priority.
I'm really not even just understanding that. I mean, are we like not having data that we need to operate, or what?
Yeah, and so I think you do have the data, but it takes a lot of effort. And just I'll give an example right now with the
So are
maintenance
you saying they
management.
have the same number of people, but they wouldn't be working as much?
They would,
Well,
I think, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
hold on a sec, Rick. Finish that last answer that you were
Yeah.
responding with.
So I was saying, so essentially, you may have the same number of people, you may have less people. Essentially, with the same number of people, you can get a lot more done. Like there are priorities in terms of maintenance, you can actually look at the existing maintenance data and reports in a lot more detail, and that would result in reduced costs related to, again, if an engine fails, that's a pretty significant cost. Or if you have to miss a trip, that's again sort of not really serving your users as well. It's freeing up resources to do things that are more of a priority. You could certainly, again, I don't want to speak for Lextran, but you could take a call as to whether the resources that are freed up are best utilized elsewhere, or you want to make reductions. I mean, that's, I think, Lextran's call.
And Rick, in your point, I see, and I may be interpreting it wrong. Correct me if I have, but I'm looking at these boxes as sort of buckets of places where there are gaps, and human capital I feel like would probably fall under like the business process or the organizational, but it also recognizes that there are technical challenges as well. And so I'm seeing, and maybe I don't see like a specific bullet that talks about that speaks directly to your question, Rick, but I feel like that's probably where that question would live, around human capital, would be in the organizational bucket.
Yeah.
Well, again, I don't sense, I mean, are we missing maintenance schedules now?
If I could jump in, this is Carrie, just for 1 second to answer some of these. The scope of work that IBI undertook was focused on this needs assessment and then recommendations for a phased approach to, the feasibility and a phased approach to how we would make decisions about technology and technology investments. We are, primarily concerned with our voice radio communication system, which is, the hub of everything else we do, both internally and externally. So I think these are excellent questions about, staffing and how we would allocate other resources. But I don't want to put IBI too much on the spot, because that really wasn't the sort of specific scope of work that they were tasked. And I do want to make sure that we have time for them to go through kind of the recommendations and what they are asking us, or, sort of proposing for us to do in the phase 2. So maybe we talk some of the other, kind of downstream impacts after we get a sense of the, next steps of what is being recommended for the technology, if that's all right with the board.
Okay.
That works.
Okay, sounds great. So I'll continue, and we're again happy to come back to the questions. So I think the next part of this was really the technology vision setting. I think we recognize with any agency, you have a mission. And we really want to make sure that any of the work we're doing is kind of tying into that larger overall mission. And so again, we kind of had a stakeholder workshop, kind of incorporated input from all the different sources, and collectively came up with a vision statement that's kind of presented there. Really, and I think again, focus of the technology vision is you could be super innovative, but at the same time, that might mean a lot more cost. I guess, Lextran as an agency, you want to make use of proven technology. You want to use, but cutting edge data practices. And that's really, you want to make it be efficient, reliable, accessible to your customers. So that's the vision. We actually have goals which are in the report as well, which are a little bit more specific because this obviously is fairly high level. Uh, so we kind of took that technology vision and the accompanying set of goals that came along with it to kind of start developing the architecture uh, and really go from there. So in terms of the vision architecture, I think there's a lot of detail here. Again, I'm not sure I want to actually get into the nitty gritty. I'll just point out, so the red in this diagram is new components, the green is modified components, and then the blue is existing components. So really what this diagram is trying to illustrate is you're trying to strategically replace the technology components that are most critical and need to be replaced for whatever reason, whether some technology is going obsolete, won't be supported any longer, or technology that really is preventing agency staff members from doing the things they need to do. You want to start with that, not spend crazy amounts of money, but really kind of strategically change the pieces that will have the most impact in the short term, but then build to the longer term. That's essentially what's the message in this architecture. Uh, so I think I'll again move on, but again, happy to come back into the architecture. So this is sort of the phase one recommendations. High level, this is a set of technology priorities that we came up with. Part of this was the radio system was certainly a known thing coming into the RFP. Uh, your clear technology priorities are the radio and voice communication system. Uh, Second is the data management scheduling tools, and we'll get into this in more detail. And then third is the maintenance management software. Thereafter, the high priority is really things you want to handle in the next 1 to 2 to 3 years. The medium priority is something that you need to start thinking about right now because they are going to start becoming more of a priority in 2 to 3 years' time. So that's the CAD AVL system, along with the CAD AVL real-time information as well. There are things you can do with the real-time information right now, but really it's highly dependent on the information you get from the CAD AVL system. So that's why that comes after the CAD AVL system. And then the enterprise resource planning tool that's kind of closely tied to the maintenance management software, but really want to make sure the maintenance management is a good base before we get to the larger ERP system. And then lower priorities, things that you could maybe uh, either replace or maybe you could do something on the policy side. That's the fare collection system and the IVR system. So those that was. Mhm. Please go
I'm
ahead.
sorry. I apologize for interrupting. Carrie, I just wanted to ask about like the real-time information. I just wanted to get what does it look like in real life? Like what kinds of information are we talking about?
So the real-time information, I'm having a little trouble with my video right now. Sorry. So real-time information, that is an excellent question that is has a lot of different facets, and it is certainly the key way that our customers interface with our
Okay.
system as far as how they get information now. So real-time information generally is, the arrival of the bus when you're waiting at the stop or when you're waiting at the transit center. And, for years and years and years, people got a printed bus schedule and looked at the chart and the time points and kind of estimated when they thought their bus was going to arrive. And we don't live in that era anymore. We can get almost any piece of information we want, in our through our phones or mobile devices. But all that in some ways is easier said than done because it's very fluid for the customer to be able to pick up their phone and get a real time arrival. But the back end, how you push that, how you access that location data and process it through your system, the proof is in the pudding, or, how the sausages are made expression. So the other factor for real-time information, and why we wanted, IBI Group to talk about it, was there are lots of different ways that people choose to get information. It might be Google Transit, it might be Transit app, it might be MyStop. It could be any number of sort of third-party or secondary systems which give customers, download on the App Store a real-time information, as well as real-time information that you might see, like that you would be used to seeing at an airport, for arrival and departure time. So it's easy to say real-time information, but everything that goes along with it is, there's a lot of additional data layers and systems interfaces that go through it. So um, that was maybe that was more information than you wanted, but it is a sort of a multi-layered process because there are so many customer-facing options, but we need to maintain some control of our data and our information as well.
That's really helpful because I think when I look at this list, I think about like having the tools for our team that they need to be able to do their jobs well, but also there are a couple things in here that are like customer facing.
Yeah.
And so I just want to make sure that the board had that context. We had up until like 3:55 scheduled for this.
Yeah, so I know we're.
I think let's take a couple minutes longer. I think it's really germane to the discussion we're going to have right after that. So
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll stop interrupting you and we'll take a look at these recommendations. Thank you, though.
Absolutely. And so I know we have very little time, so I'm going to just focus on the high level priorities. So in terms of the radio system, the key here really is that your current system, it's Lextran operated, it's only Lextrans. It's going to be essentially the lease is up next year, June 2021. And the person who holds the lease essentially said that they don't want to continue supporting it any longer. And it's an obsolete system. So it needs to be replaced, whatever happens. And so we, as part of this work, again, kind of looked at a few different alternatives. Voice over IP, we looked at, again, getting a new system, new radio system, getting onto a partner radio system. And so really the recommendation here is you want to make use of existing technology infrastructure that's out there. We've actually started some discussions with the LFUCG radio system. So they actually have a county-wide radio system, which is up and functional, which is well supported, provides interoperability. And so Lextran can relatively quickly, without as much financial, again, investment, jump onto their system. There's some investment, but not as much as if you got your own replacement system. So the next high priority recommendation, again, was the data management scheduling. The current system is, again, it's a one-man operation. It's TMS is the current system. It's really a very manual, labor-intensive system. Only one, maybe two people have the requisite amount of training. And so it's really a risk to have that because the scheduling software is really the basis of all data that then flows to the operational and then flows to the real-time information. It's very risky to continue relying on that. And it also doesn't provide good reporting, doesn't provide good analytics to actually explore different scenarios. What can you do if you ran a route slightly differently, or if you created a new route? It just doesn't allow to do that. And at least over the last 5 years, there's been sort of a significant improvement in this space where there are a lot of good solutions out there. So that was the second high priority recommendation. And then the third high priority recommendation was really the maintenance management system. So here, your current FleetNet software, again, similar to TMS, very old, requires a lot of really manual processes. I mean, some of the things we heard were just kind of mind-boggling. I mean, someone had a workaround where they were using a stick to measure how much, I think, gas was in the system, something of that sort. So I think the other challenge here is it was actually bought out by Avail, which is the CAD AVL vendor, and actually support has gotten much worse since they bought it out. So at least maybe FleetNet as a whole needs to be replaced, but the maintenance management capabilities really are not meeting the needs of the agency. So it just requires a lot more manual work. It prevents people from really doing what they can do. in terms of maintenance. There's, again, we touched upon efficiency. This is certainly a big one there. So those are the high priority recommendations. I know we don't have a lot of time, so I'm actually going to skip through some of the medium priority ones. Overall, the message here is, I think the medium priority ones are, we're recommending that you kind of evaluate over the next 2 to 3 years. The CAT-AVL, I think you're all probably aware of that. The maintenance support agreement was recently signed, but that really is managing the vendor relationship, seeing if they would continue supporting you as you need. If not, that might need to be replaced at some point. The real-time information, again, really we should have called this customer information system. And that, again, there are things that can be done in real time, especially can be done in the short term. And I think Lextran recommendation is saying near term, try to make some improvements. Longer term, you may actually have to kind of either replace the system or combine data from different sources to provide a consistent, coherent real-time information feed to the customers. Um, and then again, ERP, I don't want to get into this too much, but again, at some point, you might need to replace the FleetNet system. And in terms of the low priority recommendations, again, just at a high level, mostly policy stuff. I think a lot of this is impacted by what happens in your earlier recommendations. So, we don't have much time at all. In terms of the project benefits and costs, really, what you're trying to, with your existing system, and this is just those three systems, the radio system, the maintenance management system, and then the scheduling system. You have a number of support contracts. So there's annual costs associated with them. Plus, there are clearly impending capital costs associated with replacing the radio system. That is, again, there's no way around that. You need voice communications for operators. So we basically took the existing cost, kind of built in a 5-year cost, because that's how we wanted to do the analysis, look at a 5-year range. So the 5-year support costs for those systems are about 250,000. And then the capital costs, again, this is with your existing system, assuming the replacement of the radio system with something is at least 50 to 150,000. So what are the, sorry. Okay, so in terms of the benefits, really, what are the benefits? The radio system, you're really improving interoperability and you're improving redundancy. I think right now you're on your own system. There are challenges with interoperability across the county. So you're solving some of those issues. You're again improving the functionality available to the maintenance staff, making their lives, uh, making it more efficient for them to do their work and kind of look at other priorities. Really, lots of reduction of manual processes. It's not someone spending a day or two just kind of entering things on from paper to uh, again a worksheet so that it can actually be analyzed. And on the scheduling side, it's really much better scenario analysis reporting. Uh, and so those are sort of the major benefits. And so in terms of the costs, and I know I'll stay here on this slide for a little bit. So you'll notice that we have those three systems. Those are projects. These capital costs, you'll notice there are quite significant ranges, uh, both annual operating costs as well, and those are used to build in the 5-year costs. And so those ranges are really, the low range is what you'll get is a basic system that will sort of meet your needs, but may not have the best user interface. You will still be facing some of the challenges you're facing currently, but it will resolve functionality related elements. The high level, really the 150,000, 100,000, 300,000, those are, you are getting the best UI available in the market, the best sort of integration features, uh, and sort of the best long-term flexibility. But a lot of those might be geared towards much larger agencies than Lextran. And so I'd say main thing you want to focus on is those 5-year costs for comparison. And so low end, it's about 470,000, high end 1.2 million. But realistically, I think if you were to go out to bid, you'd probably something that would meet your needs would be midway through that somewhere. So it is a reasonable amount of investment, but it's really trying to improve, again, the technologies that exist that allow you to do a lot more things that you couldn't do. So that's
Are you saying in essence that we'd be going from 5-year support costs of $250,000 a year to under this new system support costs of $470,000 a year to 1.2 million?
No, so the support costs are one element of this. So that's most.
Are our support costs now $250,000 a year for 5 years?
Yes, so those are support costs for the system as it exists, but the radio system will need to be replaced. There's almost no way of getting around that. So at least with the existing system, with all the challenges that exist, you'd have to spend anywhere from 300 to 400 minimum, and that it's quite likely on the higher end, because if you go out with a replacement system, I think the radio system is the big one here. That'll need to be replaced regardless. So kind of this 150 to 400, that's regardless of whatever you do, that you kind of have to do.
If you go with the data management system and the maintenance management system, at a minimum, that will be an additional $320,000 a year.
Yep.
Right.
I mean, minimum 320,000. It's not additional in that of that 250,000, I believe about 150,000 or so was just those systems. Mackenzie, do you have the exact figures? I can pull them up as well.
Yeah, I think it's even actually more than that. I'd have to pull them up, but yeah, no. The voice radio system right now is a very inexpensive system. So the bulk of those are those existing data management and maintenance management systems. I would also say that, I mean, I think as kind of Nihit was alluding to, there are things like benefits. Like right now, it's not possible for Lextran to really do scenario analysis on their routes to assess where is high ridership that would really make sense to change your routes and improve service. And things like that you just can't do with the existing system. So part of the discussion is also
periodically, every few years, we do this route analysis, right?
Yes, this is Carrie. We have done
we had, it would cost like, what, $200,000? So would that eliminate the necessity of doing a route analysis?
It would definitely give us the ability to be more nimble and agile in between the COAs, and potentially you would not need to do a kind of a large full scale every 5-year, comprehensive analysis. So the one point, and I know we probably need to move on, and just wanted to thank IBI for their work and the analysis, because one point that I want to make sure is clear is that our voice radio system, the lease is up in a year, and it is not a sustainable or long-term solution for us. So we're going to have to make a decision about the voice radio system, and the data management and scheduling tools. That next line item, that has to do with the other sort of underlying systems of how we plan and operate and communicate information. So those are really critical too. And the TMS, which was mentioned earlier, is also is a very small company, and we don't have a lot of flexibility, or we also have some concerns that may not be the best long-term solution, especially for something that is so core and central to so many other systems. So, and I also want to make sure that I set the context of this slide, and also this work that IBI has done. Is these are kind of first level estimates of what the capital cost and annual operating cost would be if we move forward with these 3 high priority systems, that, or overall systems that they have recommended for our first set of high priority projects. So, if are there other questions for any members of the IBI team? Because I believe they are going to log off or jump off the call if we're ready to move into the resolution or memo and resolution phase.
Is there anything else um, in this presentation, Carrie, that you think is important for us to have context on before we move on?
I don't think so. I mean, thanks for putting up the schedule. You know, this would be kind of a first pass at a project schedule with those, you know, different projects laid out. And again, I just want to emphasize the critical nature of our voice radio system, and that we have to make a decision on that. You know, or a decision about how we move forward fairly quickly. So I think that's it. Unless there's any other questions.
Yeah, and I think if there aren't any other questions, I think again, thank you all for giving us this opportunity to present. I think Z, Max, and I were probably going to jump off because I know talk about things. So really hope you all keep safe, your families keep safe.
Thank you very much, and thank you for being here and your work you've done so far. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys. So we want to move into that first resolution, Carrie?
Yeah, thank you. So back in August of 2019, we entered into a contract, an overall contract with IBI Group for technology consulting services. And the project was broken into 3 phases. Phase 1, and the report that IBI Group just gave is the, you know, result of this phase 1, you know, strategic planning and sort of feasibility analysis, and their recommendations have been presented today, you know, this afternoon. So the resolution that we have before you tonight, resolution 2020-08, is to move forward into phase 2 and phase 3 of our contract with IBI. So if we were to move forward with this resolution, which is what our recommendation is, that we would move forward into a project design and procurement phase, which would mean that these high priority projects and recommendations that IBI has made, we will move forward into more discrete projects and packages, procurements, and the like. So, and then phase 3 would be the follow-on work after we have completed any procurement or you know, completed any of the projects, where IBI Group would serve as essentially a third-party administrator almost, to ensure that what is being installed or implemented is, you know, meets the terms of the procurement guidelines, meets the system engineering requirements, and make sure that you know, we're getting all the value and everything that we ask about in that phase 2 procurement and project design phase. And I want to just come back to a point that was made in the very beginning of the presentation, that one of the challenges that, you know, that we face with technology vendors is this point about how to sort of navigate and manage you know, software applications and technology vendors, because you don't have necessarily the same sort of carrot or stick or incentives and penalties that you do in some other contracts. So having kind of a third party administrator, having the support from people who are very familiar with the industry, very familiar with the products and the applications, can be a real help to us, because we aren't necessarily going to be able to know, oh, you know, this vendor can't do this, or, you know, this is still in beta and they're selling it as a real option. So just to make sure that we understand that part of the reason why we want to have the IBI Group's assistance is both in the procurement phase but also in the implementation, that we you know, ensure that we're getting what we have designed and procured, and then also that they can sort of help help us with the full implementation of it. So again, the resolution is to enter into phase 2 and phase 3 following the phase 1 completed report from IBI Group.
Any questions for Carrie?
Carrie, this is Marcy. I just had a question.
Yeah.
These are large numbers. Do they bill us quarterly? Do they bill us when a project is completed? Is it an annual payment? How is this handled?
Yeah, so the work that IBI Group has done, their scope of work has a number of deliverables and meetings through each phase. So they're billing us upon completion of deliverables or of certain phases within their scope of work. So it's kind of an ongoing, as work is completed, billing cycle.
Thank you.
Rick, you had a thought?
Yeah, I can certainly understand why the radio system needs to be in place, but what I've taken from this is that we're not going to have really any efficiencies from this because we're going to have the same number of staff, so there'll be no payroll savings. And on top of that, we're going to spend more on maintenance, on support. So, I mean, I'm in favor of the radio system, but in terms of, I mean, if it's this whole big package, I'm going to vote against this because I think it's rushed. We have a lot of questions about this. I'm not grasping the benefits of 2 of those items.
Okay, and again, just to be clear, I hear you. As I mentioned, the decision point that we need to make sort of outside of this resolution to move into phase 2 and phase 3 with IBI Group is to move forward with the voice and radio project. So the discussion about data management and any maintenance managed software, enterprise resource planning tools can come at a later date. And I think what we would do is, given the questions and some of the uncertainty that you're sharing, is maybe dig in a little bit more to what we would see as some of the specific benefits and what the costs are, kind of that return on investment for some of the other packages that we talked about, that maintenance management and the
So this is not a package where we're going ahead with all 3 of those high priority areas that he identified. Right now we're just focused on the radio system.
Yes, precisely, because we have to do something with the radio system before our lease at the radio tower runs out.
And Carrie, my understanding is, so the result of this resolution is that IBI continues to walk alongside us in this process to ensure correct implementation.
Precisely.
The procurements themselves, those discussions are still coming back to the board for conversation that ongoing, right?
Exactly.
So Carrie, could I, I don't have any opposition to continuing with IBI to get us through these phases, but I think what I would like to see in their reporting or in the next report that we have is a little bit more of a specific breakdown on actual costs as they go through the project design and procurement phase, particularly looking at costs that tend to be less predictable, such as training costs, wages, whether, look at some change or anticipated changes and differences in, we have X number of trainings per year and we train this many people, but with this new system that might be recommended, do more people need to be trained? Is it, the cost for that? Or is it longer training for the same number of people? That kind of thing. And then also, what sort of third-party connection points we're dealing with. I'm pretty sure I understood what you were mentioning about how we sort of need to be able to interface with all of the transit monitoring systems that are out there, Google and Maps and all that, so that when customers try to get information from us, they do it from a variety of ways. What exactly does that entail in terms of human resources and technology management on our end?
Yeah, precisely. Okay, so that's a good point, and we can give that feedback that maybe some more of those specific questions about implementation cost, training, and kind of third-party integrations can be answered.
And I think that will go a little bit more directly to inefficiencies, not inefficiencies, how efficiencies will be affected by the procurement. And, you know, through with all kinds of organizations we interface with, change in technology always comes at a cost. Up front, but I think over time it flattens out.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
And I just add to the support costs because those numbers were shocking to me.
Okay. Yep. Got it. Support cost.
Does that distinction about the purpose of this resolution versus the conversations we'll continue to have ongoing, is that helpful? Or are there any other points of information folks think they need? If not, is there a motion on this item?
I move to accept the resolution on the floor.
Is there a second?
This is Mercy, I'll second.
All in favor, say aye. Let's show thumbs. Say aye again one more time, or thumbs one more time. I just want to make sure. Aye. All opposed?
No.
Thank you. And are we ready for the next resolution?
Yes. Thank you. The next, thank you. The next resolution and memo has to do with our agency safety plan for 2020, and this is the inaugural primary or first agency safety plan that we are presenting to the board. It is now a requirement for any transit agency receiving Section 5307 funds to do an agency safety plan and for it to be renewed by the board in each January. And this plan, while it is new and an inaugural version, builds on our safety management system and a number of other sort of sundry safety plans or systems that we had in place. So while this is a new document, it is comprised of a number of existing safety processes, procedures, and our safety management system that has been in place for a number of years. The other requirement that comes with the agency safety planning is to designate a chief safety officer. So with this memo and the resolution, we are asking for approval of Lextran's 2020 agency safety plan and to designate John Givens, our Director of Risk Management, who currently oversees safety training and risk management, to be our chief safety officer. And either John or I will be happy to answer any questions about the agency safety plan or his designation as the chief safety officer.
Gary, I had two questions related to this. One was just when I was looking through the document, I was curious about how some of the targets were set. So like
Yes.
injuries or something like that. The second question was, do you see any like impact of like COVID given this document?
Well, you know, it's interesting because I had that same thought. I'll answer the COVID first and then go back to the targets. So, you know, we early on we reviewed our existing pandemic response plan that was put in place back in 2009, and you know, once or at a certain point during this pandemic response, we will revisit the pandemic our pandemic response plan and update as needed, or you know, add information about COVID to our pandemic response plan. And so you know, this agency safety plan is kind of taking the higher level of kind of programmatic elements, rather than kind of the specific response that you might make to a specific risk or to a specific, you know, issue such as a pandemic. So it is kind of intended to be the overarching policy document and the programmatic elements of our safety plan. And to the targets, you know, we worked in conjunction and coordination with the Metropolitan Planning Organization, Lampo, Lexington area, MPO, and then the targets and injuries were, and that are listed there on page 9 of the document, page 52 of the board packet, were set sort of in conjunction with them, and also our own goals, kind of looking to a vision zero for zero fatalities as part of our service. John, is there anything that you would like to add or comment on about either of those questions?
Thank you, Carrie. I think you covered the basis of the plan and the overall aspect of the ASP. Those targets, Christian, as you had mentioned, a lot of that is derived from data that we've already entered into the National Transit Database. We have to enter safety and security items on a regular basis. So instead of setting targets that aren't somewhat attainable, you actually set your targets based on where you are and try to improve on those numbers. So Taz Bacara, who works directly under me as the risk coordinator, is responsible for the safety and security NTD portion of submission for our agency. So we just went back 3 years, took the numbers that we had entered, set performance targets and those KPIs on that. And then that gives us some accurate information on improving on where we currently are. And our numbers overall are good, based on the data that's been entered, especially for an agency our size. So that's where those targets came from. And that's how we measured ourselves up to this point in order to create those.
Okay. Thanks, John.
Welcome.
Any other questions on this? A motion?
I move to approve.
Second?
I second it. It's Eli.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Great. And we're getting down. Okay. Change orders, no change orders. Carrie.
Yeah, no change orders, no old business, and no new business that I am aware of, unless anybody has a new business item.
I don't think so. Proposed agenda items.
Yeah, so next month, I know we will have the officer elections kind of review of our bylaws and any committee appointments. And since it will be June, setting the meeting date and schedule for fiscal year 2021. And then I don't know that we will have any. I don't know of any of our procurements that are out on the street right now or under evaluation. I don't know that the timing will be for June, but we may have a resolution or two for that. But that's all we have for proposed agenda items.
Sounds good. No closed session today. Would there be a motion to adjourn?
I motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
I'll second. It's Marcy.
Thanks, Marcy. All in favor, say aye. Show us your thumbs.
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed to adjourning? Okay. Thank you all. Everybody have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you all. Thanks, Lextran staff.
Good night.
Good night.